What I like most about Heyday is it's more than just a book publisher, it's a whole community. Heyday represents a lot of authors who write about new ideas from California. So it's about California innovation, invention, thinking.
Heyday creates a space for California Indians that I think otherwise would have taken much longer to create. That's what's really special to me about Heyday is the focus on indigenous arts and indigenous writers.
I think what makes Heyday special is its heart. It really means it.
The process of working with Heyday was really, really wonderful. They get that whole visual aspect to bookmaking.
What makes Heyday special is the singular vision, borderlines activism. It's founded on this creative principle of inclusion. I remember this one time when Malcolm told me, he said, "I'm not really interested in books." He said, "Books are the stone for the soup around which the people gather."
The important thing about Malcolm's vision and Heyday's vision that we could not move forward if we did not know our own history in a very specific way.
There are books that I think would be too much of a flight risk for many publishers to touch. But with the right support and community around them, you can get these works out into the world and it makes our world a better place.
Hello? Hey, hello. Hi, I'm Steve Wax. I'm the board chair of Heyday Books. And welcome to Heyday's holiday 50-year bash. We're celebrating 50 years of literary riches here. I need a glass. First of all, I want to extend our deepest gratitude to Malcolm for joining us, Malcolm Margolin, who founded Heyday. And I also want to thank my marvelous fellow board members. We had a board meeting today downstairs, went really well, and especially the extraordinarily talented and hardworking staff of Heyday. They're incomparable. And thank all of you for coming. I think we were trying to get 200. I was saying, well, usually 40% don't show up. Well, actually, I think 40% more showed up. So Heyday has provided really a very valuable lesson to the board. Most of us came from other careers of, in my case, filmmaking and marketing. In other cases, there's a former our board co-chair or vice chair is a former HR person at HP, et cetera, et cetera. We have some authors on. We have a number of people, a couple of people who represent the California tribes. And so it's a really wonderful mix of people. And I wanted to talk just for a second, mention that Heyday has provided like a really invaluable insight into the publishing world for us, because most of us didn't know anything about publishing. And thanks to Steve and Gail, Steve Wasserman, the publisher, and Gail, who is the general manager, Gail Waterwa is the manager. By the way, I was going to make a joke about I was the warm-up act for Steve Wasserman, but I didn't think that would be fair, so I wasn't going to do that. But anyway, we've done everything from donating money, trying to set policy, overseeing contracts with the leadership, helping raise funds, analyzing PLs, consulting on marketing strategies. But probably the best experience we had was a bird walk we took with one of our authors in Point Reyes Station, which was really extraordinary. And so it's been a really interesting adventure for the 5 years I've been on the board, and I think for a lot of the other board members. My take on it is that, on Heyday, is that it's more than just a nonprofit book publisher. It's like it's part of a vibrant community. There's a vibrant community of individuals, as another Malcolm Gladwell said, that believes that the world you're given is not the world you have to settle for, which I think is a really great thought. And Heyday has been pioneering for years the voices of new ideas from California and influencing more and more, thanks particularly to the distribution that Steve brought in when he joined, the rest of the country and to some extent the rest of the world with its ideas from California. We're celebrating our I think it's a golden jubilee, I believe. Is that right, Steve? I have no idea what a jubilee is. I haven't been married that long yet. But our vision extends beyond the 50-year mark. In fact, what we're trying to do is focus on the next 50 years, not the last 50 years, although we are here to celebrate the last 50 years with Malcolm. And so we've been talking a lot about where we should Heyday be in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, and stuff like that, which has been really interesting. Particularly on the board level, we're trying to figure out our role and how we play in that playground. So I invite you to join us on this evening, which is going to be a wonderful journey through the culture of Heyday, and for the next hour or so, probably 2 hours. I'll break it to you. So thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. The board really appreciates it. And here's Steve Wasserman.
Before I make any remarks, I would like to present Taria Smith, who directs our Roundhouse program, and she will deliver a land acknowledgement. Taria.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Okay, so the truth is that I am a stand-in for someone much more awesome than me. Corinna Gould, the chair of the Confederated Villages of Lishan Nation, cannot be here this evening, and so she sent over the land acknowledgement for us to read on her behalf, and so that's what I'm here to do. Okay. On behalf of the Confederated Villages of the Lishan Nation, we're gathered at the top of one of the original place of our ancestors, Hushun. This territory has been one of abundance since time immemorial, and as we gather today from all walks of life to celebrate the great contributions of Malcolm, we are honored to welcome you here for this occasion. Malcolm's work over the decades, bringing light to the stories and histories of California Native peoples, giving him the opportunity to meet and converse with our California Native elders and to envision an institution that would give rise to our voices and stories being heard. One such story was the book he wrote, The Ohlone Way, which poetically told stories that were rich with imagination of our shorelines, lands, and lifeways. Malcolm single-handedly gave us a place again, not just for history, but in present day. Over the years, Malcolm's work in being an ally to so many of us gave us a platform in which we could say to millions of people worldwide that we are still here. I thank Malcolm for his work, his dedication, and his incredible work to also assist us in saving the West Berkeley Shell Mound. And we are blessed that his life work was created on our homelands where it has been able to continue to create abundance. Thank you.
When 8 years or so ago, I learned that Malcolm was stepping aside after 40 plus years since he founded Heyday in 1974, and there was an opening to do an impossible thing, which was to succeed his great 4 decades at Heyday. I seized the chance to return to my natal town, Berkeley, where I had grown up and been raised, and abandon all the East Coast affectations, well, not all of them, that had somehow welcomed me when I left California to seek my fortune in the provincial precincts of Manhattan. My parents were still alive, as is my 95-year-old mother today, and all my rebellions were against much larger, impervious institutions and never against my folks, who always sought to put wind in my sails. I met Malcolm at least 25 years ago when he was among the very first publishers who took out a booth at the newly founded Los Angeles Times Festival of Books, where I was working for the LA Times as the editor of their book review section, back when they had a book review section. And we recognized each other, though we presented very differently, as, I think it's fair to say, as members cut from the same cloth in some fashion. And the great thing about Malcolm was at least two or three things for me. Tremendous mischievousness in the eyes. A born storyteller. And a man who had, how to put it, nailed himself to the crucifix of beauty and joy. I've never met someone who had embraced the notion of joy and beauty as almost a kind of theology, as almost a kind of ideology. That, and of course, the ideal of friendship and encouraging the best in people. And it reminds me of something the great apostle of Cuban independence once said, was that what mattered was not the amount of resources you had at hand, but the number of stars on your forehead. I never met a man with so many stars, whole galaxies on his forehead. And he was publishing or bringing into being the most astonishing books. And in an age that had gone mad with the pleasures and seductions of the digital world, and in which the book was said to be over, here was someone who, in a way, was a cousin of the slow eating movement, the slow food movement. You heard that? Malcolm was an adept of the slow reading movement. He was someone who was devoted to the idea that it was important to encourage people to slow down, to notice the world around us. Hence his and the incredible people that he drew to his side, the multiple staffs that worked so ardently for Heyday down the decades. Hence the tremendous commitment to celebrating nature, to defending the environment. He was also someone who knew, as the great French writer André Gide once confided to his journals, that he once said in the late 20s of himself that I know I shall have entered old age when I awake and no longer feel outrage. Somehow, Malcolm has remained forever young, outraged at the injustices of the world that press upon us so acutely, but without ever devolving into a kind of complacency, and nor did he allow his outrage to leach from his lived life the joy that he took from the meeting of wonderful people, the establishment of friends, many of whom are in this room tonight. I want to take a moment and ask, we have a lot of members of the boards of Heyday who are here. I want to give special recognition for the stalwart ways that they have down the decades contributed time, effort, their resources to making this, as perhaps Malcolm might have put it on the other side of the tracks in Boston, this little verstugene publisher. Might I ask all those who have served on the board and currently do so, please stand. We'll give you a round of applause. I also want to recognize the many people who are in this hall tonight who worked together in a collaborative way, again, down the 5 decades of Heyday's existence, who made up the staff. Staffs often garner too little appreciative attention, but tonight is your night as well. Please stand if you worked for Heyday. Heyday has stood for a number of things over this last half century. I remember in 1996 being invited to attend the 50th anniversary party for the founding of the very good and prestigious publisher Farrar, Straus and Giroux, who threw themselves a self-congratulatory party at Town Hall in Manhattan. 50 years since Roger Straus founded it in 1946. There were a lot of people who showed up. They all had a good time. And here we are in 2024 celebrating 50 years against all odds. People talk about the death of the book. They talk about the decline of literacy. We are now celebrating this year, I am honored to say, based on the foundation that Malcolm Margolin and his associates laid, we're now celebrating and have been celebrating for the past 5 years the best fiscal condition of Heyday in its 50 years. Despite the velocity of our culture and the distractions of the industrial entertainment complex, the truth of the matter is we have more readers, we have more sales. Our sales have grown by 1/3 to 40% over the past 8 years. Now, doesn't relieve us of the obligation to beg for money. We do beg for money. The sales alone are insufficient to cover the expense of running a mission-driven publisher. And so we're deeply grateful for all of you in this hall and others, frankly, around the country who have parted with tremendous resources to keep this thing going. And you know, in this life, it's very easy to kill off things. It's very hard to act as the midwife to the birth of things. And we are forever grateful to Malcolm for imparting to us a DNA. And there's one thing I can say to you tonight. It's the languages in the introduction that Gail and I put together for the Heyday at 50 volume, which I think is part of the swag everybody has gotten, which has a number of selections from the more than 500 books that have been published over the last 5 decades. But my pledge to you, on behalf of everybody at Heyday, is we have never published a book cynically, and we never will. We never will. I will come back and make some closing remarks. I do want to introduce a little segment, a film that was made not all that long ago by the very talented native filmmaker Cody Lusich to honor what was then the 35 years of the founding of News from Native California. And it will also introduce you a bit to Malcolm as well, and all the people who have collaborated on this magazine, which continues to celebrate the cultural renewal of the indigenous peoples of California.
California, the place we call home. We have names for these places, passed down from generation to generation. We know the heat of the desert. We know the spaces between each pine tree. The dance of the waves as they meet the coastline. The shadows each mountain makes. Stories traveled on the backs of runners. Our oral tradition following them as they moved along ancient trails. Now paved over with asphalt, the landscapes our people cared for become cities, and communication was replaced by a different form of news. It traveled in a new way, created more trails, and forged new bonds, strengthened by the sound of our voices. In the mid-'80s, California tribes were experiencing a cultural revival. At the same time, a publishing icon from the Bay Area was coming to life. Little did we know, it would play a major role to support our efforts in the years to come.
Magazine and Malcolm, it's the time when we started, bam, learning our languages, bam, doing this. The biggest language revival, the magazine supported that. And that's the way they supported the artist. If this is real to you, then we will make sure others see it as real.
I remember seeing the first edition of News from Native California, and it had a Yurok guy on the front. So there it was, and I read it, and I thought, wow, pretty interesting. It was kind of a lackluster, black and white kind of a thing going on.
The story is, the way that it started was Malcolm Margolin and Vera Mae Fredrickson were having lunch, and they came up with this idea of making a calendar of events for that would serve people throughout Native California. And then David Perry, who was a Coast Miwok, the third co-founder.
Heyday Books existed before news. It's kind of an underground publishing house. By the seat of your pants, stuff was getting published.
But they got it done, and all those boxes of books that they had underneath all the kids' beds at his house, and then they'd load up the car and go around all over the place and get bookstores to take his books. And so that was Heyday Books. That was the start of it.
Over the next 28 years, Malcolm Margolin and his band of misfit journalists traveled across California, visiting, forming relationships, and earning our trust.
Yeah, well, you know how it is in Native community. They're not just gonna say, oh yeah, come right here. They're gonna check you out, kind of feel you out and see what you're all about first. Give you a chance. I mean, no one's necessarily gonna be rude to you, but they're gonna wanna see what you're about. And I think Malcolm is a very genuine person.
So when I first saw Malcolm on the reservation here, Malcolm is a listener. He knows how to listen.
The majority of these dolls that I have up here are made by Vivian Snyder, who lives up on the Hoopa Reservation. And she gave me this one, and guess who that is? It's Malcolm. She made, I think, maybe 3 or 4 of them. My mother got the magazines when they first came out, but she also was the person who introduced me to Malcolm Margolin.
Then when he did write, when the first thing comes out, or the way he would talk about us, was beautiful and warm. I don't think it ever went romanticized, and it could have, but it didn't, because he was talking, and the authors were quite often us, and when he would talk about us, it was what we were actually doing. It's the time when we started, bam, learning our languages, bam, doing this, bam, it changed. But then he saw the excitement of all that and the beauty of all that, and just eased right into that next wave of us. It allowed us to keep trusting him.
I was fascinated by the first issues of News from Native California, and over time Malcolm began to show his sincerity by creating space, opening space, publishing, providing the opportunities. So it was never about him.
He was never trying to appropriate, being present, getting to know people as people, and the people were always more important.
They were immersed in the people's lives. I think that might be the difference. And their observations were real clear. Their observations were who's doing something.
He asked me to write an article on the Hoopa York Settlement Act, written on this little teeny square, Macintosh. Later on, Janine came on. Parts of the magazine were starting to grow.
The Heyday office was a lot more like a clubhouse than a publishing office, right? Like, there was an open door, there was a pot of coffee on. Lynn Risling would come down and visit. Julian Lang had an office there. Outside Malcolm's office with a big round wooden table, and just at any point you could just find people there. They would gravitate there.
We were thinking more of ourselves as, guerrilla reporters, I guess.
Being in the office, and Malcolm would come in and be like, "That's it, everybody put your computers down, or we're going to a big time, like get in the car."
Traveling light, get in the car, drive all night, wake up in the morning in a new place.
You think it was gonna last one day, and then like 4 days later, you would finally get home. The rest of us were tagging along making a magazine, and Malcolm was just out like seeing friends and learning about the world.
The integrity of the magazine grew, and with it, its popularity. It had struck a chord among our people and represented an authenticity that was undeniably native California. It became something to call our own.
Was amazing. I think it paid homage to the California people and what we do, our culture, our traditions.
Like we're saying, we're all from a place, and if you go to that place, there was culture attached to that place. You were either fishermen, hunters.
Our song, our dance, our language.
Painters, photographers, basket weavers, boat makers.
A lot of the traditions that once again had life breathed back into them. They use the term revitalization, renaissance. It's breathing life back into the language, back into the baskets, back into our canoes, back into our songs, back into our foods. Back into our medicines. Go on and on and on, back into who we are as a people. We did not fall into their template. We weren't my fine feathered friends with their war bonnets and the teepees. This is a really sensitive thing to say too. Here in California, you always had to confront that. The powwow community, because LA, Orange County, has the largest Native American population in the United States. But the majority are not California Indian. The majority of these people have not had a relationship to California Indians. This was one of that moment where we became elevated and we could hand it to them and say, see, we're still here.
Over the years, the magazine went through several stages of growth, and in 2015, a new editor, one of our own, who would again revitalize the magazine, and for the first time would be based out of Southern California.
I met Taria when I was the editor of news, and she was a journalist at FNX. I think I knew on that first day that I wanted her to be the next editor.
I love Taria. She's a lovely human being. Really is a lovely human being.
Having her in that position helped us down south too, because I think News from Native California, because it's produced in the Bay Area, but now she knows and recognizes the Southern culture, so she has the ability to enter into communities and balance it out.
Taria is the first Native Californian to run the magazine.
Now I think they have a pretty slick magazine.
We all just get to steward it, right? You just get to carry it for a little bit of time, and then you hand it to the next person and they get to carry it.
Every time I see this, I'm humbled and know that I and my colleagues are privileged to act, however modestly, every day to both preserve and deepen this legacy that was begun so marvelously. And I just want to salute Taria, who remains the brilliant editor of this indispensable magazine. And the only thing we need to do is grow the circulation. This is one of the best kept secrets of the state of California. We have 2,000 subscribers in a state of 40 million. So my challenge to you is, if you don't subscribe now, subscribe. If you do subscribe, bring in 5, 10 friends who can also subscribe. It's really a joy. It's a thing of beauty, and you'll learn something you didn't know on virtually every page. We're going to honor, in addition to Malcolm, who will be receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, we also created a few years ago something that we were pleased to call a History Award. Why? Why a History Award? Because we think history is really important. It's important to figure out where we came from, all of us, how we live now, and how we might live in the future. And so there are many different histories, and they all jostle for attention. And then this year, a book appeared that we thought really upended received notions of what history could be about and how it might be told. And so this year, we're presenting a novelist, Percival Everett, from the great state of California, for his novel published called James, a Novel, which is a retelling of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but this time from the point of view of Jim. I won't bang on any more about it because Percival, alas, is unable to be with us this evening, but we flew down to South Pasadena, where he lives, and we recorded this little conversation, and I invite your attention. So I wondered, had we ever met? I don't think we ever
I don't think so.
met.
No.
When did you come to California?
1992, but 1 or 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And I rebuilt a ranch and just trained horses there.
And what did you train the horses to do?
Well, animals won't lie to you.
Yeah,
So,
it's a problem with our species,
yeah.
isn't it?
And if they lose faith in you, if they believe they know better than you do, it takes a long time to convince them.
Right.
Otherwise.
I think there are probably lessons there
Yes.
for human interaction, right?
Most of what I know about people I get from animals.
We thought to give you this award in somewhat of a mischievous spirit.
Okay.
Since Heyday is celebrating its 50th anniversary, and you know a thing or two about independent publishers, having published many of your books with Grey Wolf, and I have often been struck when people have come over to my home and they see these thousands of books, and they would ask, well, how do you organize it? And I would sometimes joke, well, gesturing toward the fiction, I would say, well, that's the lies. Those are the lies. And I'd gesture over to the nonfiction, history. I say, oh, that's the truth. Of course, the older I got, the more I realized, no, that's exactly wrong. There's more truth in a short story of Chekhov's than in the whole of Gibbon.
Yes.
So we give these 2 awards at Heyday, one in honor of Lifetime Achievement. You're too young to get the Lifetime Achievement, despite the prodigious number of novels and poems and other work that you've done. But our admiration for James, a Novel, suggested to us that, this deserves the History Award.
Wow.
Because you did something, I think, that speaks to a neglected or under-acknowledged truth is that literature is as much, if not more, a contribution to history as these scholarly, allegedly nonfiction accounts are. So,
thank you. I'm so flattered by that.
for you, what has drawn you to basically storytelling as a way to get at human truth?
It's something I think about a lot, but still don't have a satisfactory answer for. Like you, I have come to believe that truth resides in our ability to interrogate and interpret story, not in the collection of factual data. You can have 7 novels about Hitler in the bunker at the end of his life, and there need not be a single fact in any of those, but they can all be true. And you can have a parade of factual data that might paint some kind of picture, but in no way address the truth. Yeah, that's an oversimplification, but it tells me that truth doesn't reside in conforming with so-called reality, but in conforming with our understanding of human behavior and desire and history. And that's a failing for me in our culture. There's a phrase that films use all the time to entice people to watch, which is based on a true story. And as we know, none of these stories are true. They may well have some source but the sadness for me is that it addresses an increasing failure in our culture to be able to read and interpret stories and find the truth that we need.
It's curious what you say, that films often feel compelled to include that disclaimer or teaser that it's based on a true story, as if that assertion still has a claim on our belief in the authenticity of the story that's being told to us.
Yes.
When in fact, in so-called real life, how often have you heard when some dramatic event happens to somebody, the first reaction is to say, oh, it felt just like a movie.
That's very good, yeah, that's true.
Now, you're on record as having said that you had read Huck Finn 15 times or some such.
Just for this book. I read it because I needed to divorce myself from the text.
Right.
And the best way to do that was to become truly sick of it. And around the 5th time through, I was fairly sick of it. But I wanted to inhabit the world and not owe any loyalty to the text, which I started out loving.
Right.
And it's fair to say that I will never read this book, Huck Finn, again, because I'm so sick of it. But as I understand it from people who have read James, there's a lot of that world makes it in, and that's what I wanted.
Yeah, inevitably,
Yes.
you know, it would have had to. And how did it come to you to want to tell the story or a story from Jim's point of view?
I wish I could tell you that it was a long burning desire to do this.
No, we'll go for sudden epiphany.
It was.
Too.
I was playing tennis and I hit a ball out of the court and I stopped and I thought, has anyone ever told Huck Finn from Jim's point of view? Which also explained why I hit the ball out of the out. And then as I started thinking about it, and it seemed that no one had, I also realized another failure of the novel was something that Twain couldn't really have addressed, and that is the depiction of enslaved people was that of being superstitious. Obviously, they were uneducated, but not human enough to entertain complex ideas. And certainly that was not true.
Right.
And so that was part of the mission in approaching the novel.
What do you want people to know about this book if they haven't yet read it?
Nothing. That's not my job. Reading, and I know I say this all the time, is the most subversive thing we can do. And it's the if we talk about things that we can do to preserve our freedoms, reading is that one thing where we can start. And as that subversive thing, I can't tell anyone what I want them to see. People find in art what they need.
And one of the beautiful things about art is the way it escapes the gravitational pull of its creator.
Yes.
And then falls through time and circumstance. And people bring to it and find meaning, accretions of meaning that very often the creator of this work had no idea were there.
None. People say, "Did you mean this by that?" And I'll think to myself, "That sounds pretty good," and I always say yes, but
right.
Very seldom is that true.
No, it's a wonderful thing about art. It's both ostensibly useless and the most important thing that we do. That
it makes us human.
Yeah, and so many things conspire to dull that humanity and to constrain our ability to look at the world in a fresh way.
Well, we won't talk about politics right now.
No. Well, that's another interesting thing.
Every work of art is political. We can't get around that. And sometimes a work ostensibly will be apolitical, but that in itself is a political statement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let me take this moment just to confer upon you the Heyday History Award of 2024 for James, but really for a whole body of work. So we have an award, actually a physical award, that I want to give to you. One of the Heyday symbols is the acorn. In conformance with the notion that art is both entirely indispensable and useless, we have for you an acorn.
Oh, that's lovely.
An acorn. And the great thing about this award is that this acorn is entirely empty.
I love that.
This is a vessel into which you're free to put all your hopes or aspirations.
Or acorns.
Or acorns.
That's wonderful.
And it is with really a sense of privilege and delight, both as a reader and also in the capacity as publisher of Heyday, to Percival Everett, a history award for James, a novel.
Thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
I'm really honored and flattered by this. That's lovely.
Miranda, one of Heyday's most invaluable and indispensable authors, the author of Bad Indians, who's made a special trip here to Berkeley to appear tonight and then tomorrow night at an ICANN event as well, which I encourage those of you who have more time to please go to. And Malcolm's acceptance will be original because as many of you know, his speech has been compromised. So the colleagues and comrades have put together, thanks to, believe it or not, hold on to your hats, AI technology, which has been able to learn his voice and his words. And so his acceptance speech will be partly delivered through the magical technology of AI, as well as a number of close family and friends who will read parts of it. Please join me in welcoming Deborah Miranda.
Salakiyetsu. I'm going to tell you a little story. When I first began to realize the hybrid, multi-genre, multi-voiced content of the project I was working on, Bad Indians, a tribal memoir, two things were clear to me. First, that the book could not be written any other way. This was how the ancestors wanted it to be, how they wanted it to go out into the world, and I better just shut up and listen. And second, I knew I would have a hell of a time finding a publisher who would or could put such a project into print. Malcolm was publisher of Heyday Books when I first sent him a rough draft of the manuscript. I'd known him for years for his extensive work at California Indian gatherings and Heyday events, but he'd also published Only What We Could Carry, the Japanese-American internment experience. This anthology featured many talented authors and artists, but what electrified me was the book's design. It featured prose, poetry, memoir, photographs, U.S. archival posters and publications, art, excerpts from a graphic novel, propaganda ephemera, and personal documents. Heyday, I thought, was the answer to my question, who would ever publish something like Bad Indians? And the truth is, even Malcolm passed on the book at first, telling me that, quote, it seemed more like collage than a book, something more suited to the web, something that has the look of notes toward a book rather than a finished book. It was just a rough draft, but I was crushed. His honest criticism, however, lit a fire under me, and I wrote solidly for the next few years. When I had a much revised and complete manuscript in my hands, I decided as a tenured professor I should shop it around, do the usual academic presses, only to have the manuscript put on one shelf for 9 months and another for a year before the response finally came. This is an interesting concept, but marketing says it wouldn't sell. Ha, they've been kicking themselves for the past 11 years. Finally, I decided I knew where the book's home, its real home, should be. I sent the revised manuscript back to Malcolm. I knew I was asking for trouble. If he didn't like it, he wouldn't hesitate to say so. His response, let's do this. And boy, did Heyday staff and designers ever do the ancestors proud. This is Malcolm's genius, both with Heyday book publications and with News from Native California. He literally wedged his foot in the door of the publishing industry that ignored West Coast authors in general, Native authors in general, and California Indian authors completely. He got his foot in the door and he pushed. And he continued to push, making space for Indigenous California voices, culture, art, and writing in ways that have transformed our lives, transformed the way the world sees us, and transformed how the world responds. And he did this as our partner, not as some white savior who knew how to communicate our message better than we did. His natural inclination towards curiosity, his desire to hear and value stories and storytellers, and his willingness to learn, to know what he didn't know, was and is an incalculable treasure. In one of the stories that Isabel Meadows, Roomson woman, tells, she remarks that if I had known how to write, I would have written up the life of those Indians. If they had not all died, the Indians here, the country would be full of them telling stories. Oh, Isabel, we are still here, and thanks in large part to Malcolm, Heyday, and News from Native California, we have a way to distribute those stories. I am grateful for Malcolm's presence in this world.
I am grateful for the ways our paths have crossed as colleagues and friends, and I am honored beyond words to be here tonight with him to present him with this award. Namasia Nekel Pasalaki. My heart is full.
Many writers say they've never gotten the recognition they deserve. I certainly can't say that. I'm the most overappreciated person in the world. I've received many awards, but this one is really special to me because it's being given to me by people who know me well and have worked with me a long time. Gail's worked side by side with me for 20 years. Steve had to take care of all the skeletons in the closet and has steered Heyday into a stable and dynamic future. These are some of the greatest people. Their high opinion of me means so much. Thank you, Steve, Gail, Emmerich, and everybody else for this honor. I've been given credit for skill, credit for savvy, credit for hard work and keen vision, but the fact of the matter is that I've been lucky. I was born in Boston at the right time in the right place. 1940, the Depression had ended. Fascism had been beaten back. The horse and buggy were almost gone, and TV had just been invented. I lived in a Yiddish-speaking, immigrant community where there was a tremendous sense of optimism and hope, a world of leisure aplenty. America was a land of freedom, a land of prosperity. There was plenty of work, and immigrants could have important jobs and become wealthy. I remember being so proud to be an American. There was a security to that world, a belief that there were institutions and people who would take care of you. When I was a kid, my vision was to be an ice cream truck driver. I pictured myself stopping at street corners, getting crowds of people together, opening up an ice chest, pulling out all sorts of treasures, and giving them out to people who will be happy and will like me in some way. I think that publishing is a glorified ice cream truck. I go around and I collect beautiful things and store them away, then bring them out and give them to people. And they like me. It's my negotiation with the world.
Growing up in a Jewish ghetto, I felt different and never really fit in, although I was fairly successful as a kid. I was daydreaming, read tons of books, listened to the radio, and looked out of the window a lot. In Boston, I was exposed to great libraries. It was hard to hear his voice, actually. I'm sorry. A little bit. Okay. In Boston, I was exposed to great libraries, museums, and other first-rate cultural institutions, as well as a deep sense of history. I went to Boston Latin, the first public school in the country. I found it sterile and constraining and rebelled against it at first. But it was there that I learned how to study, how to do research, and how to excel. The sense of security I enjoyed in my youth allowed me to bum around for several years when I got older. During that time, I devoted myself to learning the craft of writing. I went to Harvard and got very little out of my formal courses, but was exposed to some great ideas. This is going to be surprising. The best part of my education was the long conversations with friends in coffee houses. It was in Cambridge that I began to meet some people who would change my life. Walter Pitts, an applied mathematician and logician at MIT, became my first mentor. Walter was one of the greatest geniuses of the 20th century. At the age of 12, he wrote to Bertrand Russell after reading Principia Mathematica in the library and finding 3 errors. He was one of the youngest people on the Manhattan Project and developed the mathematical formula that was the foundation of artificial intelligence. However, he had few friends and was lonely. I began hiking around the White Mountains with him on weekends. It was my first adventure in the outdoors, and I was seeing it through Walter's eyes. One glorious summer, we spent 2 months climbing the Tetons, the Wind River Range, the Cascade Range, Mount Olympus. I absorbed a lot of Walter's way of seeing the world. He listened. He saw the underlying beauty in things. In my later writing, I find myself channeling him, his intensity and sensibilities. His presence was an enormous gift in my life.
When I graduated from college, I didn't know what to be. My wife, Rena, and I took off in a VW bus to see the world, staying mostly on campgrounds and on beaches, and ending up in Berkeley at the end of 1969 because we needed a place to have our first baby, Reuben Heyday Margolin. Hey, that's me. Wait a minute, who wrote this? I found a job with the East Bay Regional Park District, and then I fell in love with Berkeley. It was graced with wonderful bookstores, a utopian quality, a vibrant literary culture. Amidst the flurry of anti-war organizing and protests, many other issues and causes were gaining strength and visibility. The environmental movement, Black power, gay liberation, women's liberation, the free speech movement, American Indian movement, human consciousness, Buddhism, disability rights, education and reform. The pioneering ideas and organizations that were arising in Berkeley then were intoxicating, a whole new world. My childhood in Boston gave me many of the skills and attitudes that would be with me for life. The 60s gave me a place where they could be used. The 60s were our country's renaissance, as profound as the European cultural shift of the 15th century, and in many ways similar. Just as Europe crawled out of the Dark Ages, shedding outmoded beliefs, validating pleasure, embracing new ideas, expanding human potential, fostering great art, calling all institutions into question and eager for change, so did America revitalize itself, rediscovering the Greek classics, giving people more choices in what work they did, where and how they lived, who they loved. Ideas from American Indians, Buddhists, and other non-Western cultures gained currency and popularity. The 60s were Americans' Renaissance, and Berkeley was its Florence.
Sorry. I wrote my first book in 1973. It took me 4 months, aided by a grant of $2,000 from Stuart Brand's Point Foundation. The Earth Manual described the youth conservation program I was doing with the East Bay Regional Parks District. I sold it to Houghton Mifflin for $10,000 advance, a small fortune in 1973. Meanwhile, the Parks District fired me because I refused to wear a uniform. Parenthetically, I ran into Malcolm when I was an 18-year-old camp counselor in Redwood Regional Park, and he was the only ranger in the whole park who was not wearing a uniform. Back to his speech. They fired me because I refused to wear a uniform, so I know it's true. I had just turned 30. I'd written a book, so I took a year off to celebrate. Every day was an adventure. I'd go hiking in the East Bay parks, walk every inch of the park, explore it all, and wait for something beautiful to happen. Then I'd write about it, creating a quirky literary guide, a love letter to the world. These daily ramblings became my second book, East Bay Out. I couldn't find a publisher, however, because it was too poetic for guidebook publishers, too local for national publishers, too quirky for literary publishers. But this was the do-it-yourself era, and lots of people I knew were self-publishing. So I figured I'd do it too. I got together a group of folks to do illustrations and maps and rented an IBM Composer for $2 an hour. I set the type and designed the book myself on a light table in our bedroom. I sent the manuscript off to the printer, and 2 months later, a truck pulled up in front. The driver asked for our loading dock, which of course we didn't have. With the help of friends, we unloaded 7,000 books up a flight of stairs and into our apartment. We piled them under beds, along the walls, and in a bathtub. That night was one of the happiest in my life. I'd written and designed a book. Now I was a publisher.
A week later, the books were still there. I somehow thought they would wake up in the morning like chickens and find their way to the local bookstore. Alas, I had to take them there myself. My first stop was Cody's book. Fred Cody took 24 copies, gave me a hug, and put them on the counter. My second stop was Moe's. My third stop was the Nature Company, which had just opened a store on College Avenue. They invited me to do their first in-store reading. At each store, I arranged for a window display and other promotional placement. Eventually, I began going to conferences, conventions, Indian gatherings, and other events to sell books as well, befriending booksellers, some of my favorite people along the way. I was so pleased and found I loved selling books almost as much as I did writing it. I got great reviews and hit it at just the right time. Hiking, camping, and backpacking were becoming national pastimes. The book caught on. It ended up selling 100,000 copies in a year. Money came pouring in, and I found that being a writer was only part of the job, and I really loved the rest as well.
Back then, California history consisted of the gold rush, the missions, Fremont, Vallejo maybe, but the average person knew almost nothing about California Indians. Then people like historical geographer Gary Britchen and the California Studies Association began to broaden our sense of history, and for the first time, Chicanos were on the radar, along with Filipinos and other groups. Stuart Brand had just created the Whole Earth Catalog, and many folks were doing books. There was a do-it-yourself movement. You didn't need a publisher. You could just typeset a book and design it, and you had all the time in the world to do it. Bob Callahan, Ishmael Reed, Ralph Warner, Phil Wood, all these people were starting presses. And there were also booksellers who were supportive, Fred Cody, Ferngulani, and Kepler's. New distribution services were cropping up to meet the needs of all the new authors and publishers too. Book People, Publishers Group West, small press distribution. It was so exciting to be a part of it all. For the first 6 years, I operated Heyday out of my house. The kids would be running around. By now, Reuben had been joined by Sadie and Jake. Friends would often come over for lunch. The atmosphere was informal, familial, and personal.
My awareness of California indigenous people and the beginning of my lifelong friendships with so many Indians really began with the writing of my third book, The Ohlone Way. There were no computers or internet then, of course, and libraries offered only sketchy information. Letters, newspaper articles, accounts by early explorers, mostly old books by white anthropologists. Knowledge was fragmented and scattered all over the place. But I quickly recognized that indigenous culture and mores had much in common with the ethos of the 60s, living a simple life, close to the land, in cooperative societies. I was fascinated by this other world, and when legendary anthropologist Vera Mae Fredrickson asked me if I wanted to meet an Ohlone Indian who lived in Fremont, I jumped at the opportunity and was shocked to learn that Ohlone Indians still existed. His name was Phil Galvin. He turned out to be one of the most amazing people I'd ever met. Soon I began to meet many indigenous culture bearers from the surrounding areas, people like basket weavers extraordinaire Elsie Allen and Julia Parker, who had direct connections to the old ways. I realized we would never see people like this again. When I started writing The Ohlone Way, I thought I would be writing a eulogy for a bygone way of life. Instead, I ended up witnessing its rebirth.
There are so many people who inspired me, pointed out a path for me, who saved me on occasion. Walter Pitts, Fred Cody, Lee Swenson. Lee was crucial to Heyday's getting off the ground. Aside from being my dear friend and confidant, he introduced me to many funders, many ideas, and so many authors. He improved my mind, helped me understand how to run a nonprofit, and made me laugh. I miss him so much. And then there was George Young. George came into my life at a critical time, chock full of experience and good advice. He'd been an editor-in-chief at Ballantine Books and was the editor of the spectacularly successful career guide, What Color is Your Parachute? George taught me about pacing, how to put out more than one book at a time. He stayed around for several years as a kind of guru to the staff. Mike McCone was another important person in Heyday's history. He was the executive director of the California Historical Society. While serving on my board, he helped transform it from a group of my friends, with me holding all the power, to a fully functioning board of directors who took their oversight mandate quite seriously. Mike also invited Guy Lampard to join the board. Guy had created a major wealth management company and was the least likely person in the world to become a part of Heyday. But he had enthusiasm for ideas and for beauty, and also a tolerance for risk. He really understood the best of what we did. And that brings me to another person who has been very important to me and to Heyday. When I heard he'd applied for the job as Heyday's director, I kept wondering why he'd want to run a regional publishing company. He had major experience with major institutions. He'd been the book review editor of the Los Angeles Times, created the LA Book Festival, and gave these great speeches. Steve turned out to be the perfect person for the job. He's professionalized the organization, put together a spectacular staff and meaningful list of books, and crafted a marriage of commerce and idealism that I don't think any of us could have pulled off.
I left Heyday in 2015. It was a traumatic, difficult time for me. I tried to retire, but it didn't work. I really had no idea what to do with myself. How many crossword puzzles can you do in a day? So I went to Earth Island Institute, and they agreed to be the fiscal agent for a new nonprofit I was excited to bring into being, California Institute for Community, Art, and Nature, California ICANN. California ICANN focuses on 3 areas of interest close to my heart. 1, California Indian cultural heritage. 2, Berkeley as a center of artistic vitality, advocacy for progressive causes and social innovation. And 3, the dynamic connection between the arts and the environment. Given the accelerated rate of my declining health, bringing Claire Greensfelder into the organization a few years ago was one of the best decisions I ever made. Claire, now California ICANN's executive director, has navigated the thorny world of nonprofits, my Parkinson's, a pandemic, and California politics with skill and grace. She has worked with the Indian world for many years and has a wealth of social activism and nonprofit experience.
Lately, since I'm not writing books anymore, I've been going through Heyday's archives at the Bancroft Library, 50 years of notes and documents. The magnitude of what we've done with a little help from our friends is astounding. Over 500 books. There are so many great stories in the archives. The publisher and me just can't ignore the wealth in those 75 boxes of memories. In fact, the archives are such a trove of history and good writing that I've started a Substack page to share this largesse with the world. I invite you to visit me there or in person at Piedmont Gardens in Oakland, where I now spend my days. I got into publishing because I didn't want to work for anyone else. I wanted to be independent and create a world around my strengths and beliefs. After several decades of pursuing independence, I found myself dependent on staff, on booksellers, on funders, family, and friends. The name for this dependency is community. I failed at independence, but I gained community. The friendships I have made are the most treasured gifts of my life in publishing.
Join me in thanking in the readers here, who shouldn't just be anonymous and only known to close intimates, but Sadie Costello, Ruben Margolin, Claire Greensfelder, David Scortino, Greg Castro, Gail Wadawa, Kim Bancroft, Pamela Michael, and of course, without whom, Malcolm. Another round of applause, please. And this day that we're celebrating 50 years of Heyday also happens to be exactly the day Malcolm was born 83 years ago. So please join me in a rousing 84. Well, I don't know how it is that he keeps getting younger and I age, but join us singing Happy Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Malcolm. Happy birthday to you. I'm going to make a few concluding remarks and then mingle. First, I want to thank Jiajing Liu, who has mastered and organized the proceedings. She is the development manager for Heyday, a largely thankless task, but she brings to it imagination and zeal. So if you feel inclined to thank her, please do so personally. It will be welcome. Another way to support Heyday, if you're not already a member of Heyday's membership club, that is a way of sustaining at a modest annual fee of $150 or $250, and you will get the most wonderful swag, just like you got coming to this event, from time to time during the course of the year. You'll get books, other invitations to events. We host all kinds of conversations with authors, some of them our own, others not. But we believe in trying to stitch together a community of activists and writers. We believe in deepening civic conversation as a way to increasing and spreading an awareness of the things that matter most. We believe in ideas. We think they matter. We believe in a diversity of voices. And I also think it's important to acknowledge that we believe in the future. We want to honor the past, but we want to look forward to the next 50 years. This is not an impossible goal. In fact, it's kind of a miracle that we're still here at 50. But we believe in those miracles. And part of those miracles is, the essential miracle is our authors. As I said, many of them are here in this room this evening. I want to, in particular, single out two authors without whom Heyday would not be flourishing as it is today, and it has been especially true through the years of the pandemic, when so many people were placed under a kind of de facto house arrest. And then when the contagion began to diminish somewhat, people really wanted to get out into their backyards. They wanted to get out to the coast. They wanted to look at the birds. And John Muir Laws is one of the most gifted and essential. I don't, John, can you stand? Or areas, John Muir Laws. This year also marks 20 years of publishing with Heyday. 20 years. And John Muir Laws also looks like Matt Damon's first cousin once removed. No one should be this gifted or handsome. I mean, it's incredible. And I want to announce that we are doing everything that we can to organize and support his efforts at the nature journaling, the wonderful conferences he's organizing, along with his close associates, that is spreading the word. He is more than a gifted artist. He's a teacher in the best sense. And so I want to announce that we are publishing the John Muir Collection. These books and more to come will thicken the texture of what we do to try to support his good efforts, and they are a backbone of Heyday's achievements, and we are grateful to you and grateful for your support of his books. Another important author who really created a splash some years ago with his California Field Atlas is Obi Kaufman. Obi is also here. There he is in the back. And I was just knocked out when I stepped into the role of publisher to inherit, because I had nothing to do with the acquisition of the California Field Atlas. It was Lindsay Baer and Malcolm and others at Heyday who recognized the gift that this man had at a moment when, sadly, another major publisher, let's not be coy, UC Press, who were presented with the idea of doing a California Field Atlas, but said to him that, you know, this isn't really a field atlas in the way we would understand a field atlas, and they wanted to edit him and sort of kill the spirit of his book. And he came to Heyday, and Heyday specializes in quirky books, and Malcolm and Lindsay Baer and others said, oh, this is so cool. And I remember when I got to the job, I went to see Obi present his book at the Mechanics Institute, which Ralph Lewin, then its executive director and on Heyday's board, he's here tonight as well. And I remember the place was packed, and after his presentation, there were a long line of people, and a woman asked, her second question was, exactly how do you use this book? And he said, without a trace of irony, oh my goodness, this book is completely useless. It's a kind of fever dream love poem to California, at which point the whole place erupted in applause and everybody bought a second copy. Well, Obi went on to write a trilogy, what she calls the California Lands Trilogy, examining the coasts, the forests, and the deserts. I, for my part, was determined to turn him into, how to put it, the Michael Connelly or the James Patterson of Heyday. And he has become a Stakhanovite of literary production, and I don't think the man sleeps. Anyway, I'm proud to announce tonight, looking forward to securing our future for the next 5 years, in addition to John Muir Laws, who forms one of the great pillars defending nature, celebrating it. I'm happy to announce tonight 3 new books that will take us to the year 2029 or 2030, called The Origins of California, The Cities of California, and The Futures of California. Now, it's said that you can't really judge a book by its cover. Oh, no, no, no. As Oscar Wilde knew, always judge by appearances. So We've signed these books up. I think you'll believe and join us in doubling down on the DNA and the legacy that Malcolm Margolin has so generously provided to us as we explore all the things that make Heyday wonderful: nature, the paradoxes and contradictions of California history. And California, in our view, is a big international notion. It's as much an idea in the head as it is a physical place. Celebrating indigenous peoples' cultural renewal and the issues of social justice that press so clearly upon us. We also believe in making haste slowly. We look forward to working in a deliberate and prudent fashion to secure the financial stability of the place. The other thing I want to say is that the art on the program is also by John Muir Laws, and one of our board members who's an extraordinary woodcut artist herself, Catherine Canner, has helped put together her drawing, which is a keepsake, which is available to be purchased, actually, on your way out, if you should want to do so. Oh, donation tonight, it's yours to keep. And I also want to say that because of this harvest and the special nature of our golden anniversary, we have, as of this moment, exceeded our goal of raising $500,000. And I also want to acknowledge that I received this morning an email from a valued and treasured author of Heydays. He and his wife said that they are leaving 3% of their estate to Heyday. I invite others to consider doing so as well. And this keepsake has a quote from Henry Moore, which is one of Malcolm's most cherished quotes. It reads, "The secret of life is to have a task, something you devote your entire life to, something you bring everything to, every minute of the day, for your whole life. And the most important thing is, it must be something you cannot possibly do." Anyway, join me again to celebrate Malcolm, our 50th anniversary, and look forward to the future with optimism and joy. Thank you so much for coming.